Kreg just announced an entire lineup of 20-volt lithium-ion tools, so this is so neat to see they're getting in the market and challenging some of the other big guys on cordless tools, so let's take a look. Now, full disclosure, Kreg did send these out so I could get you an early look at them, but most of these have hit the market now, and if there's anything good, bad, or ugly that stands out, trust me, you'll hear about it. There's a lot to cover on this new line, but here's what we're going to go over today. We've got that new barrel grip jigsaw, the sander, and oscillating tool, and everything we're looking at today is cordless on that 20-volt line. We've got a trim router to look at, an impact driver, a compact drill driver, and then a small circular saw for trim work, but maybe the most exciting part of this new launch is this Rebel. It's a cordless pocket hole machine. And I've never seen anything like that on the market. It's the first of its kind. And then we've got a 7 1/4 inch circular saw to look at, as well as Kreg's line of blue ion batteries. Then we'll finish up with Kreg's revised track saw and a sneak peek at their entire line of saw blades. I guess I'm not a very patient person because I already got into the drill driver and that one looks really nice, but let's open up that impact driver next. Like many other cordless tools, you can get these typically as a tool only if you want, and just get 1 or 2 batteries for your entire fleet of tools. That usually works out pretty good, but first thing that strikes me on this one is just how light and compact it is. Let's add a battery and see how it feels. Now, typically I would think to use an impact driver with a larger battery like this 4 ampere-hour version, and then a smaller 2 ampere-hour unit on a drill driver. So that's the way I'm going to set these up. But you know, initially I'm just looking at these tools and it's amazing. The fit and finish on these is really on par with some of the big manufacturers, and Kreg is just right out the gate with these. Now, these both have the chuck system I was expecting, a quick release hex chuck on the impact driver, and the one thing that's different on this one is it's not only quick release, but it's actually auto ejecting too. So if you feel like you're pulling on the bit to remove it, just put your hand beneath it and it'll just spit it right out. So that's kind of a nice feature. Versus the drill driver uses a more standard keyless chuck, and this one is all metal construction. Nice. And the fact that this one comes with an all metal chuck from the factory means I won't have to upgrade it like I've had to do with some of my other drills. Both of these drills come with a belt clip accessory. I don't tend to use these because I'm working in the shop most days, not on a ladder, but it's good to throw that in the drawer in case you need it. Now, on the drill driver, this one has just the simplest clutch mechanism, so just spin that to the desired setting or rotate it all the way to the drill bit icon if you don't want it to be limited by the clutch. Of course, this one has a 2-speed gearbox like most high-end drills, so that's nice. Initially, when I opened this up out of the box, this dial was a little bit stiff to turn, and actually I just turned it to the extreme range, right and left, a couple times, and it freed up, and it's been good ever since. This is probably the most important tool on any cordless line for me because it's the one I use most often. Put that onto the high-speed range, and that LED light looks like it really shines right where you need it. It's down by the battery, but it's pointed up to the drill bit, so less of a shadow line than I would see if the light was mounted up here like you sometimes see it. Okay, I've got my clutch setting about 19 and I'm on the high speed on the gearbox, so let's drive a screw without pre-drilling and see how that does. Yeah, that feels good. Good power. Or if brute strength is the order of the day, you just might want to go with that impact driver. No pre-drilling. Nice. And same style of LED on that. Gets the light right where you need it. There's a really interesting feature on this impact driver as well. There's a mode selector for speeds 1, 2, or 3, or select the assist mode to prevent overdriving your fasteners. Since these are probably my number 1 and number 2 most frequently used tools, I'm going to be a little more detailed with them, but let's weigh them up and see how they compare. The drill driver with that 2 ampere-hour battery, just 3 pounds 3 ounces, super lightweight there despite its power. And then the impact driver with that larger battery, 3 pounds 9 ounces, but let's swap batteries and see how that compares. So these ones, of course, are totally interchangeable, but with that smaller 2 ampere-hour battery, the impact driver is actually just 3 pounds even. Then for me, sometimes it's just the seemingly inconsequential things, but I like to know that my drills are going to stand upright on their own, regardless of what battery they have on, and they're just fine on that. They're also flat on the back, and that actually lets them stand in other positions as well. So I think the overall design on these is really good. Plus, I think with any new cordless line, you need one tool that kind of pulls you into the system, and this drill driver might just be the one. Let's take a quick look at the router, and then we'll get out that Rebel cordless pocket hole machine and see what that one's all about. I am a big time router fan, and I have several cordless routers, so I guess my fear is on this one that it really has to live up to my expectations to impress me, but let's see how it looks. Yeah, there we go. Looks like there's a nice big locking lever on that, and height adjustment is by means of this wheel, so we'll have to see how accurate that is and do a little testing. So that clear dust shroud kind of clicks in on one side of the router, and then it's retained by a single Phillips screw on the other side. So a lot of times I'll just kind of let dust fly when I'm doing these little trim cuts, but that's a nice fitting to have if you need it. The fitting on that is about 1 7/16 inches, so it was just a little loose for the typical fitting that I have, which is 1.5 inches, so might just have to use an adapter on that. Included with the kit are 2 stamped steel wrenches, and there's actually a 1/4 inch collet installed, as well as a 6mm collet that they throw in as well. That looks like it's an insert and uses the same nut as the other collet. And then there's a proprietary guide bushing, so the only knock on this one is you have to actually remove the sub base to install that, but it's better than my other cordless trim router, which on that one you can't use guide bushings at all. I'll show you 2 things I really like on this router, and then 2 things that maybe could be improved, and I'll see if I can come up with a quick solution for those. So this one has variable speed, which is a great feature for a trim router, but it also has this standby mode, and that's kind of unique. If you just hit the power button, nothing will happen. You have to first hit this unlock button. That'll put it into standby mode, then hit your power, and you'll notice it'll come on with a nice soft start. And there's even an LED light on the router. I like that. Another cool thing on these blue ion batteries I just noticed is there's a power level indicator, so just hit that button and you'll know exactly where you stand. The 2 things I don't like initially, and they kind of feel related, is this lever is a little bit hard to open, and then once it is open, there's a little too much slop in this mechanism. So what I'm going to do is see if I can adjust the nut on this so that it's a little bit easier to close, and maybe when it's halfway shut, that'll give it enough tension to make it more reliable for adjustments. I had to dig into my sewing machine tools for this little 8mm, but I'm just going to loosen that slightly, and we'll see if we can make that easier to close. So I want to see how that feels now. Yeah, that's a much better action as I close that, but if I just close it about halfway or maybe a little less, that gives me a nice firm action so I can accurately adjust my bit height before I lock it in place. Much better. This one has a nice push button spindle lock, so you can change bits with 1 wrench or 2, your choice on that one. I do like that it has flats on that spindle shaft in case you want to give it an extra snugging with 2 wrenches. Yeah, having that cordless router sure makes quick work of it. And hey, it sits flat without the battery for bit changes. Why don't all manufacturers do that? It really is important. It needs to sit like that for bit changes. And then there's a mystery knob on the back that's only labeled as accessory mounting knob, and maybe there's some future accessory or an edge guide that might work with, but drop me a note in the comment section if you have an idea what you might use that for. And now for the long-awaited, much-anticipated Kreg Rebel. That's that cordless way to make pocket holes on any of your projects, so we're going to check that out. And if this sort of tool roundup is speaking your language already, consider subscribing to the Thoughtful Woodworker. I've been dying to get into this one. Let's see what we get. Some bits and accessories. Nicely padded, well packed, that's for sure. There it is. Nice. I've got the Kreg Foreman as well, which is a great way to make pocket holes in the shop, but this one I feel like there's going to be a little bit of reading through the manual. Nice action to it. There's a little trick to installing the bit, but see it done once and it's no problem. The key is to pull out this safety latch on the side, and that'll let the handle move forward. And it's just a matter of sliding this lever to the side, and that'll easily release your motor, and you can just pop in the bit from there. And I like the fact that that's a quick release chuck system, just like the impact driver, and makes it easy to swap out those bits. Just align the bit with the guide and pop it in place, and then just return the lever. Nice. There's a couple accessories that come with this. There's a dust chute, and you could probably have that on whether you're using it or not, but just slide that down into position, and then the cover goes on. And even without dust collection, there's a nice little bin here that will accept some of the debris, and that does seem to catch a good bit of the dust. There's also a narrow rail accessory, and just slide that over and clamp that in place. Then when you go to install your rail, like for a face frame, you'll have the perfect amount of tension on that featherboard. If you know Kreg jigs, you know that there's at least 2 settings on each jig to get everything to come out right. One is this fence setting, so just pull this out to correspond with your material thickness, 3/4 in this case. The other primary setting is up top. Just pinch these 2 buttons on the top and you can slide that as needed for the correct setting. Again, we're going for a 3/4 inch material. There's also a clever micro adjust feature. Now normally you won't need to use that and the dial will just point straight ahead, but if you're using an oddball size like undersized 1/2 inch plywood, you may choose just to make slight adjustments to the depth of cut. And with these powerful cordless tools, I always try to make all my adjustments before I pop the battery in. And there's one other feature on this Rebel, you just have to see to believe. Check this out, drop down stabilizers. There's one on each side, and that's really helpful when your tool is not fully supported on the workpiece. As with so many other Kreg products, just align the mark on your workpiece with the mark on the jig and you're good to go. Kind of feels like it's sitting on here backwards the first couple times you use it, but just apply good downward pressure here. There's no need to clamp this. It's got a little lockout on the side, so press one thumb lever, either left or right side, and then depress the trigger and you can make that cut. That is super quick. And for more standard cuts, just align the tool with the mark on your workpiece and go ahead and make those cuts. And the remarkable thing about that, if you've used many of these pocket hole jigs, is there's no clamping to use this Rebel. That's the part I really love. And I noticed the cuts were really clean, whether that was MDF or maple hardwood. So that's the KP TRB 1000 Rebel, or AKA the Kreg Rebel, and links will be down in the description if you want to jump right to it. But you know, my favorite single feature on this has to be those drop down supports. Kind of reminds me of outriggers on a backhoe, but that's a well thought out design. I've got some video resources you guys might find helpful as well, like how to add a Kreg dust separator to a Dewalt Stealth Sonic vacuum, so I'll put that video down below as well. That's actually a hard mount to the vacuum and it just kind of floats off the floor. It's been working really good for me. Alright guys, stick with me. The next 3 are going to be this impressive cordless jigsaw, the sander, and that oscillating tool. All cordless, all brushless motors, but one of the more impressive tools in this group is this barrel grip jigsaw. This thing has more features than I've seen on any single jigsaw. We'll pull that battery off to have a look at some of these, but variable speed on the back there, and it goes all the way up to setting 6, or the final setting is A, so that's kind of that assist mode where it'll maintain the proper speed for you so you get the best quality cuts. On this left side of the tool, there's a power switch that will lock on, so you get dual LED lights there. And it's nice to be able to keep that on so you don't have to continually hold a trigger for longer cuts. And then there's this elliptical setting, 0 through 3, with 3 being the most aggressive, or typically I'll have it down at 0 for just a perpendicular cut. Nice looking dust collection on that that's positioned very near the blade, and I found a nice shop vac fitting that fits that very nicely. So on the other side there's a feature I have not seen elsewhere. It's actually a fan setting. It's a slide switch if you want a fan to help clear your cut line. There's a tool-free quick release lever here, and just by sliding the shoe forward you can position it at common angles, and there's detents for that, so most importantly when it's time to return to 90 degrees, that's easy to do. Of course, you've got a blade roller guide there and a blade guard up front, but the mechanism here that helps you install the blades or change them out is actually pretty clever. So we'll just pop that blade in. Nice spring-loaded action. You can give it a little overpressure if you want, and you're ready to cut. You know, brushless motors have certain characteristics, like they're more powerful and more compact, but they also spin down quicker, and that's super important for things like circular saws, but it actually is helpful for sanders as well. Pretty nice rubber overmold on this one, feels good in the hand, but I was glad to see that this uses the typical 5-inch 8-hole pattern discs, and that's just hook and loop to hold those on. So I've got tons of those from Klingspor, so I'm glad I didn't have to start over with something new. One difference you'll notice on this, there's a power button up front, but there's also variable speed. And instead of being a dial or a roller wheel, this is actually a 3-speed selector switch. So just fire it up and select the speed you want. And I just love how quickly that spins down. You don't have to waste any time waiting for that to stop. So dust bag or dust collector on that, take your pick, but cordless sander, I'm guessing that dust bag is going to seem pretty convenient. But that shop vac fitting I had on hand was a good fit, so never say never. The oscillating tool is an occasional use one for me, but I tell you what, when you need this tool, there's really nothing else that will do. Classic example is trimming up door jambs for a hardwood flooring install, and this is definitely the tool to have. This one has variable speed on the top, and there's a trigger lock-on switch so you can keep that humming for longer cuts. This one is not entirely tool-free for releasing the blades, but there's a quick release lever at top, and then you also need to spin off that little thumb nut there to switch a blade. So that's pretty nice. You get used to it at least, and let's pop that in and run it through the speeds and see what it sounds like. Nice bright LED light up front. What more could you want? That's a good one. All right, guys and gals, we're winding right down here. We just have 2 circular saws and 1 track saw to go over, and then we'll take a quick peek at Kreg's new saw blade line. This is a 4.5-inch trim circular saw, and this one paired with the oscillating tool I think would be a perfect kit for a trim carpenter. The tool only kit on this one is pretty basic. There's just an onboard wrench, a little dust collection fitting, and one of Kreg's 4.5-inch blade. That's a 36-tooth version. Flip it over and you'll find the arbor lock on that, so just depress that as you loosen up that fastener, and just remember that that's reverse threads. I know you're probably tired of hearing it from me, but with this new breed of cordless tools, I tell you what, take that battery off when you're adjusting your saws or changing out the blades. They're just so much more powerful than they used to be. So the thumb button on this one appears on both sides of the tool, and that's a safety lock out, so you have to slide that sideways in order to activate the tool, just like a circular saw. And just look how quickly that spins down. That is a difference maker for a circular saw. And you can use that small dust port to hook to your shop vac, or just to redirect dust away from you. There's all the typical blade depth and bevel adjustments on this one, plus that clever storage for the onboard wrench. I like it. The 7.25-inch circular saw requires a little more power, so I like to run that one with a 4 ampere-hour battery, and we'll hook up dust collection and see how that cuts. So with my figure 8 dust collection setup, that seemed to pick up a lot more of the dust than just letting it fly, so I like that setup. This one has an onboard wrench for blade changes as well, Just remember, this one is standard threads, where the 4 1/4 inch circular saw is actually reverse threads. And then that track saw is another one I would use the larger 4 ampere-hour battery for and give you a little extra juice that way. But this one has some nice features, and I did notice that everything is really clearly labeled on there. It does use a proprietary track though, so I'll have to pick one of those up before I can really dig into this one. Boy, that sounds good. Even has variable speed. I was using these Surecut blades for the 4 1/2 and 7 1/4 inch circular saws, but you know, they also make a 10-inch version for either a table saw or miter saw, as well as a 12-inch version for either a fixed or sliding miter saw. 80 teeth on that 12-inch blade should make for some pretty fine cuts. And that does give an extremely crisp cut in hardwood. So if Kreg had launched even one of these new tools, I think that would be pretty interesting, but to have an entire line on a quality 20-volt platform is really exciting. So remember, I'll have links to all these new tools down in the description if you want to check them out a little further. And if you'd want to consider subscribing to The Thoughtful Woodworker, I'd love to have you on board.